My name is Dolores Williams, 68 years old, and retired elementary school teacher. I never thought I would wake up in a hospital room surrounded by beeping monitors and tubes, only to learn that when doctors called my son during my emergency, his response chilled the entire medical staff: "I am busy. If she dies, she dies." Those words shattered everything I thought I knew about my only child, but they also sparked a transformation that would ultimately save me in more ways than one. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to follow my journey of heartbreak and healing. To understand the depth of that betrayal, you need to know our story. I had been a widow for 15 years, raising my son Jackson mostly on my own, even before my husband Thomas passed away from heart disease. We lived in a modest 2-story house in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Nothing fancy, but filled with memories from my 40 years, teaching 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary. The walls were lined with photographs, charting our family history, handmade gifts from former students, and books that reflected my passion for education. I had retired just 3 years ago, trading lesson plans for a small garden and volunteer work at the local library. My retirement party had been small but meaningful, with colleagues bringing dishes to share, and children I had taught decades ago returning as adults with their own children. Jackson had sent flowers but couldn't attend due to an important business meeting in Chicago. I told myself it was understandable that his growing investment firm required sacrifices. Jackson had always been ambitious, even as a child. While other kids collected baseball cards or played video games, he counted his allowance and negotiated extra chores for additional dollars. I encouraged his drive, believing it would serve him well. I worked extra summer school sessions to put him through college proud when he graduated with honors from Wharton. He moved to New York after graduation, starting at an investment firm and working relentlessly to climb the corporate ladder. "Mom, this is just the beginning," he told me during one of his infrequent visits home 5 years ago. "Soon I will be managing my own fund, and we will never have to worry about money again." His eyes gleamed with ambition as he described his plans for expansion, acquisitions, and wealth that seemed astronomical to me on my teacher's pension. The changes in him were gradual. First, phone calls became shorter and less frequent. My weekly Sunday evening calls were increasingly met with, "Can I call you back? I am in the middle of something." Those callbacks rarely came. Visits home dwindled from holidays only to every other Christmas, then to flying me to New York for a hurried dinner once a year. When I mentioned this growing distance during one visit, he sighed with visible frustration. "Mom, I am building something important here. Not everyone gets to retire at 65 with a pension. Some of us have to create our own security." Despite this growing emotional distance, I continued supporting Jackson in every way possible. When he needed seed money for his investment firm 3 years ago, I refinanced my paid-off home to loan him $50,000. "It is just temporary, Mom. You will get it back with interest once we close this first deal," he promised. The money never returned, and inquiries about it were met with irritation. "I will take care of it when things settle down," became his standard response. "The market is unpredictable right now." What Jackson didn't know was that I had been experiencing concerning health symptoms for months. Occasional dizziness, fatigue that sleep couldn't cure, and shortness of breath that I attributed to age and anxiety. I didn't tell him, not wanting to add worry to his busy life. My doctor had ordered tests, but I kept postponing them, afraid of what they might reveal and the cost of treatment on my limited insurance. Our final conversation before the emergency happened on a Tuesday evening. I had called because the kitchen sink was leaking badly, and I couldn't afford the plumber's quote. "Jackson, I hate to bother you, but is there any chance you could help with this repair? It is going to be $600 and my budget is tight this month." The exasperated sigh that came through the phone made me wince. "Mom, I just sent you money last month for the property taxes. What happened to your pension? You should have plenty to cover basic household repairs." I didn't mention that I had used that money to pay off the credit card debt I had accumulated buying groceries after the property tax increase had stretched my budget to breaking. I didn't tell him about the prescription costs that insurance wouldn't cover. Instead, I apologized for bothering him. "I am sorry, honey. You are right. I will figure something out. Look, I will send $200 to help, but you need to be more careful with your finances. I cannot keep bailing you out," he said before, quickly ending the call, mentioning something about an important client waiting. That was the last conversation we had before my world went black, and I woke up fighting for my life in Lehigh Valley Hospital. The morning it happened started like any other. I woke early, made my coffee, and took my medication. Around 9, I felt an unusual pressure in my chest, like someone sitting on my sternum. My left arm tingled strangely, but I dismissed it as poor circulation from sleeping awkwardly. The dizziness that followed was different from my usual spells, more intense and accompanied by cold sweat that soaked through my blouse. I remember reaching for the phone on the kitchen wall, then nothing but darkness until brief, disjointed moments of awareness. The wail of sirens. Unfamiliar voices speaking urgently above me. The sensation of movement and bright lights passing overhead. My neighbor Amanda Johnson later told me she had come over to return a casserole dish and found me collapsed on the kitchen floor, barely breathing. She immediately called 911, then rode in the ambulance with me holding my hand, even though I wasn't conscious enough to know she was there. "Your lips were blue, Dolores," she told me afterward. "The paramedics were working so fast, starting IVs and putting oxygen on you. They kept calling your name, but you couldn't answer." The ambulance rushed me to Lehigh Valley Hospital's emergency department, where teams of medical professionals swarmed around me. Through the fog of semi-consciousness, I caught fragments of medical jargon, significant ST elevation, troponin levels, prepare cath lab immediately, possible aortic dissection. A young doctor with kind eyes appeared above me, speaking slowly and clearly. "Mrs. Williams, you are having a major cardiac event. We need to perform emergency surgery. Do you understand?" I couldn't respond, but tears leaked from the corners of my eyes. "We need to contact your family right away." "Who should we call?" he asked, leaning closer to hear any response I might manage. With tremendous effort, I whispered my son's name and phone number, which the hospital extracted from my emergency contact information in my wallet. Later, Dr. Patel explained that I had experienced an acute aortic dissection, a tear in the inner layer of the large blood vessel branching off from my heart. It was life-threatening and required immediate surgical intervention. The mortality rate was high, especially for someone my age, with my medical history. "We had minutes, not hours, to get you into surgery," she explained, during my recovery. "That is why it was so important to reach your next of kin quickly. We needed consent for the procedure and to inform your family about the gravity of the situation." What happened next was pieced together for me by Sophia Martinez, the charge nurse who had placed the call to Jackson. She was hesitant to share the details until I insisted on knowing the truth. I identified myself and explained that you had been admitted in critical condition. Sophia recounted her professional demeanor, slipping slightly to reveal her discomfort. "I told him you were being prepped for emergency cardiac surgery and that the doctor needed to speak with him immediately regarding consent." Jackson's first response was apparently to ask if this could wait until evening, as he was heading into an important client meeting. When Sophia emphasized the urgency, explaining that this was literally life or death, his exact words were, "Look, I cannot drop everything right now. I am in the middle of closing a multi-million-dollar deal. If she dies, she dies. She has had a good life." Even as she relayed this to me, Sophia couldn't mask her shock at such callousness. She continued, "The doctor got on the phone then and explicitly told your son that without immediate surgery you would certainly not survive the night. He said he would try to call back after his meeting," and hung up. The medical team was stunned, but had no time to dwell on it. With no family member present to provide consent, they invoked emergency consent protocols and rushed me into surgery based on medical necessity. A hospital administrator was called to witness and document the situation, noting Jackson's refusal to participate in the consent process, despite being informed of the life-threatening nature of my condition. Dr. Patel, my cardiac surgeon, later told me she had performed thousands of procedures, but rarely felt the personal investment she experienced during my surgery. When a family abandons a patient that way, the medical team becomes their family, she said. Every person in that operating room was determined to prove that son of yours wrong. The surgery lasted 7 hours. I was placed on a heart-lung bypass machine while they repaired the torn aorta and replaced a section with a synthetic graft. I received multiple transfusions and nearly crashed twice on the table. But against the odds, my heart continued beating, refusing to surrender. I was transferred to the cardiac intensive care unit afterwards, surrounded by machines, keeping me alive and monitoring every function of my damaged body. And through it all, my son never called back. Not that night when I hovered between life and death. Not the next morning when I was still intubated and heavily sedated. Not once during those first critical 72 hours when the medical staff worked tirelessly to stabilize me. Jackson, the child I had given everything for, had written me off as already dead. I awoke 4 days later, disoriented and in pain, with no idea what had happened or where I was. The harsh fluorescent lights, beeping machines, and antiseptic smell were completely foreign. I tried to speak but couldn't due to a breathing tube. Panic overwhelmed me until a nurse with warm brown eyes and a gentle touch approached. "Mrs. Williams, you are in the hospital. You had emergency heart surgery. You are doing well. Try to stay calm," she said softly, pressing a button to summon the doctor. After the breathing tube was removed, and I could speak again, my first croaked question was, "My son?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Dr. Patel glanced at Sophia, who had become my primary nurse. It was Sophia who finally answered, sitting carefully on the edge of my bed. "Mrs. Williams Dolores," she began cautiously, "we tried repeatedly to contact your son. He knows you are here, but he has not come to visit or called to check on you." When I looked confused, she reluctantly shared the details of that phone call, trying to soften the blow, but ultimately respecting my right to know the truth. As the words, "If she dies, she dies," registered in my mind, a physical pain, worse than surgery, ripped through my chest. "There must be some mistake," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Jackson would never say such a thing. He loves me. He is just busy with work." Sophia held my hand tightly. "I am so sorry, Dolores. I wish it were a mistake." That night alone in my hospital room, except for the occasional nurse check, I stared at the ceiling and retraced Jackson's evolution from the sweet boy who once brought me wildflowers from the yard to the cold stranger who could discard me so easily. I remembered him at 6 crying when he found a baby bird fallen from its nest, insisting we try to save it. At 12, saving his allowance for months to buy me a birthday necklace from the mall. At 18, hugging me tightly before leaving for college, promising to make me proud. When had that boy disappeared? Was it during the cutthroat finance classes at Wharton, in the competitive trading floors of Wall Street? Or had the seeds always been there, watered by my own indulgence and sacrifice? The pain medications couldn't touch this deeper agony. I cycled through emotions denial, telling myself there had been a misunderstanding, anger that burned through my veins with more intensity than any fever, bargaining with God to let this all be a bad dream. And finally, as dawn broke on my 5th day in the hospital, a devastating acceptance. My son had decided I was dispensable. My life had no value to him beyond what I could provide. The truth settled into my bones with a terrible finality. That same morning, Amanda from next door appeared in my doorway, clutching a small potted plant and looking terrified at all the medical equipment. Upon seeing me awake, her face crumpled. "Oh, Dolores." "Thank God," she sobbed, rushing to my bedside. "They would not tell me anything because I am not family. I have been calling daily." Unlike my son, the unspoken comparison hung in the air. Amanda became my daily visitor, bringing magazines, home-cooked food once I could eat solids, and most importantly, news from the outside world. She watered my plants, collected my mail, and kept an eye on my house. "Your son called me," she mentioned casually one afternoon about a week into my hospitalization. "He wanted to know if I could pack up some of your jewelry and financial papers and mail them to him. Said he needed to manage things while you were incapacitated." A cold wave of suspicion washed over me. "What did you tell him?" "I said I was not comfortable entering your house without you present, and that the doctor expected a full recovery so you could handle your own affairs soon," she replied, watching my face carefully. "Was that okay?" I nodded, grateful beyond words for her instinctive protection. The hospital social worker, Miss Glenda Watson, came to see me around the same time. A no-nonsense woman in her 50s with practical shoes and direct questions, she helped me navigate the practical aspects of my situation. "Have you given anyone power of attorney?" she asked, reviewing my file. "No," I replied, realizing with shock how vulnerable I had been. I always assumed Jackson would handle things if something happened, but we never made it official. "That is fortunate given the circumstances," she said bluntly. "We should discuss your options for discharge planning and home care. Do you have other family who can assist you during recovery?" I shook my head, the reality of my isolation hitting hard. "Then we will explore community resources," she said efficiently. "You are not the first person to face recovery alone, Mrs. Williams, and our system has supports in place." For the first time, I tried calling Jackson myself using the hospital phone beside my bed. The call went straight to voicemail. I left a simple message. "Jackson, it is Mom. I am recovering from emergency heart surgery. Please call me at the hospital." He never returned that call or the 3 others I placed over the next days. With each unanswered call, my grief hardened into something else resolve. By the end of my 2nd week in the hospital, I had reached an emotional rock bottom and begun the slow climb back up. The son I thought I knew was gone, or perhaps had never truly existed. Now I needed to focus on survival, not just physical, but financial and emotional as well. Physical recovery from aortic dissection repair is not linear. There were days of progress, followed by setbacks that left me discouraged and exhausted. The incision down my chest burned and itched as it healed. Simple tasks like sitting up unassisted or walking to the bathroom required monumental effort. Through it all, Sophia became more than my nurse. During her shifts, she spent extra minutes in my room, sharing stories about her 3 children and beloved grandmother. When she discovered I had been a teacher, she brought in her 8-year-old daughter's school projects for me to admire. "You remind me of my abuela," she confided one evening while checking my vitals. She raised 5 children alone after my grandfather died, and never complained about the sacrifices. But she also taught us that love must flow both ways to be healthy. Amanda continued her daily visits, typically arriving around 4 in the afternoon, with updates about my home and neighborhood. 2 weeks into my hospitalization, she brought an unexpected gift, a stack of get well cards. "These started arriving at your house," she explained, spreading them across my bed. "I thought they might cheer you up." The cards came from former students, some now middle-aged, with children of their own, who had learned about my condition through the Lincoln Elementary grapevine. Their messages of gratitude for my influence in their lives brought the first genuine tears of happiness I had experienced since the surgery. "You taught me to believe in myself when no one else did," wrote Michael Giannopoulos now, a high school science teacher himself. "Sending that belief back to you now when you need it most." I had not realized how much of a community I still had, despite my son's abandonment. These connections, seemingly small during my working years, had silently persisted and now emerged as lifelines. As my physical condition stabilized, practical concerns began to surface. The hospital financial counselor, a gentleman named Robert Lynn, visited to discuss my mounting medical bills. "Your insurance will cover approximately 60% of the procedures," he explained, reviewing the statements. "There are programs that might help with the remainder, especially given your fixed income status." When he asked about my financial resources, I realized with growing alarm that I had limited access to information about my own accounts. For years, I had allowed Jackson to help manage my finances, giving him online access to my banking and retirement funds for convenience. "I need to check my account balances," I told Robert. "Could I use a computer?" With his assistance, I logged into my bank account for the first time in nearly 2 years. What I found sent my blood pressure monitors into alarming beeps that brought a nurse running. My savings account, which should have contained nearly $40,000 from my pension accumulation and the small life insurance policy my husband had left, showed a balance of just $3,800. My checking account was overdrawn by $250. "There must be some mistake," I whispered, echoing my words about Jackson's callous phone response. But as Robert helped me review the transaction history, no mistake emerged. Instead, a pattern of withdrawals appeared, all within the past 2 years, many labeled family support or property maintenance. Some were small, $500 or $1,000, easily missed if I was not paying attention. Others were larger, including one for $12,000 just 3 months earlier. I never authorized these transactions. I had never received this money. Further investigation revealed that my monthly pension deposits were being partially diverted into another account immediately upon receipt, an account I had never opened or authorized. "This appears to be financial exploitation," Robert said carefully. "Unfortunately, we see this often with elderly patients, particularly when family members have account access." Elderly, I thought numbly. Is that how Jackson saw me now? Not as his mother, but as an elderly person to be managed and exploited. Robert suggested I consult with a lawyer specializing in elder law and financial abuse. Remarkably, when I mentioned this to Glenda, the social worker, she had already anticipated this need. "I took the liberty of contacting Mary Abernathy," she said, handing me a business card. "She does pro bono work for seniors in situations like yours and can meet you here tomorrow if you are feeling up to it." Mary turned out to be a formidable woman in her early 60s, with silver hair cut in a precise bob and clear blue eyes that missed nothing. She arrived with a leather portfolio and a no-nonsense attitude that immediately put me at ease. "Mrs. Williams, I want to be very clear," she said after reviewing my financial records. "What has happened to you appears to be elder financial abuse, which is both a civil and potentially criminal matter. Your son has not only betrayed your trust, but may have broken several laws." The word criminal made me flinch. Despite everything, some maternal instinct still wanted to protect Jackson. Mary noticed my reaction. Many victims hesitate to pursue these matters legally, especially when family is involved. But consider this. If you do not act to protect yourself, who will? And might he do this to someone else in the future? She outlined a strategy that included immediate financial protection measures, potential recovery of stolen funds, and a complete revision of my estate planning documents. "Your current will likely leaves everything to your son," she pointed out. I nodded. "He is my only child. And is that still your wish, given what you now know about his character?" The question hung in the air, forcing me to confront the final vestiges of denial. Did I want to leave my modest estate to someone who had wished me dead for financial convenience? "No," I said, finally, my voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "No, it is not." That afternoon I made my decision. I would not only survive this surgery, I would reclaim my life, my finances, and my power from the person who had tried to discard me. If Jackson had decided I was already dead, then perhaps the mother he had known truly was. In her place would rise someone new, someone who valued herself enough to demand respect and justice. The cardiac rehabilitation specialists had initially given me a 6 to 8 week recovery timeline before I could return home. I was determined to beat those odds not from a place of denial, but from a fierce new resolve to regain control over my life. "I need to be stronger, as quickly as possible," I told Dr. Morris, the rehabilitation physician. "What can I do to speed the process safely?" Impressed by my determination, he developed an intensive but safe rehabilitation program. 3 times daily, I worked with physical therapists, pushing through pain and fatigue to rebuild my strength. I graduated from sitting at the edge of the bed to standing from walking with a walker to managing short distances with just a cane. "Your progress is remarkable for someone who underwent such a major procedure," observed Tanya, my physical therapist, during my 3rd week of recovery. "Your determination makes all the difference." It wasn't just physical strength I was rebuilding. With Mary Abernathy's guidance, I developed a comprehensive strategy to reclaim my financial independence and protect myself from further exploitation. "First, we need to secure what remains of your assets," Mary advised during one of our meetings in the hospital solarium. "Then we can address the unauthorized transactions and create new legal protections." Working from my hospital bed with Mary's laptop, we systematically changed passwords on all my financial accounts, removed Jackson as an authorized user, and placed fraud alerts on my credit reports. Mary helped me open a new checking account at a different bank, where my pension and Social Security could be safely deposited going forward. "Next, we need to document the unauthorized withdrawals," she explained, creating meticulous spreadsheets, tracking every suspicious transaction over the past 2 years. The total was staggering. Nearly $78,000 had been taken from my accounts without my knowledge or consent. This represents financial elder abuse under Pennsylvania law, Mary confirmed. We have grounds for both civil recovery and potential criminal charges should you choose to pursue them. The thought of pressing charges against my own son still felt unimaginable, but I agreed to keep all options open while focusing on protection and recovery. During this time, I was building new relationships that would prove vital to my future independence. Sophia introduced me to her church's senior outreach program, which provided volunteer drivers for medical appointments and grocery shopping for elderly community members. Amanda connected me with a handyman who offered discounted services to seniors on fixed incomes. Each small step increased my confidence in my ability to manage without Jackson's help and reinforced that isolation had been part of my vulnerability. Every new connection represented another strand in the safety net I was weaving for myself. My physical recovery continued to impress the medical team. By the end of week 3, I could walk the length of the hospital corridor unassisted, albeit slowly. I learned to manage my medications, understand my dietary restrictions, and recognize warning signs that would necessitate medical attention. Your dedication to recovery is inspiring the staff, Dr. Patel told me during morning rounds. We have started calling it pulling a Dolores when other patients show exceptional determination. This small recognition bolstered my resolve during the difficult exercises and sleepless nights. I was no longer just surviving for survival's sake. I was rebuilding for a purpose. Meanwhile, Amanda had been keeping a protective eye on my home. During one visit, she brought troubling news. "I noticed your front door was unlocked yesterday," she reported. "Nothing seemed disturbed, but when I checked your bedroom, the jewelry box on your dresser was open and looked emptier than I remembered." My heart sank. The jewelry box had contained not only my modest collection of personal jewelry, but several family heirlooms, including my grandmother's pearl necklace and my mother's wedding ring, which I had planned to give to Jackson's wife when he married. "He has been in my house," I whispered, feeling violated in a new way. Mary immediately arranged for a locksmith to change all the locks on my home and added this new theft to our documentation. The estimated value of the missing jewelry was approximately $15,000, including irreplaceable sentimental items. With Mary's help, I completed a comprehensive revision of my estate planning documents. My new will directed my assets to be divided among several educational charities and scholarship funds for disadvantaged children, with specific instructions that Jackson was to receive only a nominal $1 inheritance to prevent claims that he had been accidentally overlooked. I also executed a new power of attorney, an advance healthcare directive naming Amanda as my agent with Sophia as backup. These documents explicitly excluded Jackson from any decision-making role regarding my finances, healthcare, or end-of-life choices. "These documents create a legal fortress around you," Mary explained, as I signed the final papers. "They cannot prevent emotional pain, but they can protect you from further financial exploitation." Throughout this time, Jackson never called the hospital to check on my condition. According to Amanda, he had called my home phone several times, leaving increasingly irritated messages demanding I contact him about urgent financial matters. I instructed her not to tell him I would be discharged soon, wanting the element of surprise for what would come next. By the end of my 4th week in the hospital, against all typical timelines, Dr. Patel declared me ready for discharge with home health services. "You have defied every statistical probability for someone your age with this condition," she said, with evident pride. "But remember, recovery continues at home. You must follow all instructions and not overexert yourself." I promised to be careful while inwardly rejoicing at this milestone. The final phase of my plan could now begin. Discharge day arrived with a bittersweet quality. Over the past month, the hospital staff had become like family to me, providing not only medical care but emotional support during the most vulnerable period of my life. "You are not getting rid of us that easily," Sophia assured me as she helped pack my few belongings. "I will be checking on you during my days off, and you promised to come to Elena's school play next month." Dr. Patel reviewed my medications and follow-up appointments one final time. "You have been an exceptional patient, Mrs. Williams. Remember that healing is a marathon, not a sprint." The home health nurse would visit 3 times weekly to monitor my recovery, and physical therapy would continue twice weekly at my home. A medical alert pendant now hung around my neck, providing additional security for when I was alone. Amanda drove me home in her practical blue sedan, chattering nervously about neighborhood happenings to distract from the momentous nature of this homecoming. When we pulled into my driveway, I sat quietly for a moment, staring at the modest house where I had experienced so much joy and pain. "Are you ready?" Amanda asked gently. "Yes," I replied. "I am ready for this new chapter." Walking into my home was a strange experience. Everything looked exactly as I had left it that fateful morning when the ambulance took me away, yet everything had changed. I was not the same Dolores who had collapsed on this kitchen floor, and the son I thought I knew had never really existed. Over the next few days, with Amanda's help, I discovered more evidence of Jackson's betrayal. My home office had been rifled through with important documents missing, including property deeds, insurance policies, and tax returns. The spare key I kept hidden in the garage was gone, explaining how he had entered without breaking in. More upsetting was finding that several family mementos had disappeared. The antique clock that had belonged to my grandfather, a small oil painting of the Pennsylvania countryside my husband had loved, and the complete silver service we had received as a wedding gift. Each discovery strengthened my resolve rather than weakening it. 1 week after returning home, I made the call that would change everything. Sitting at my kitchen table with Mary Abernathy present for support, I called my bank and officially reported the unauthorized transactions as fraud. "I need to speak with your fraud department immediately," I said firmly. "My name is Dolores Williams, and I am reporting unauthorized withdrawals totaling over $78,000 from my accounts." The bank representative asked detailed questions about the transactions, which I answered with the documentation Mary and I had prepared. When asked if I knew who might have made these withdrawals, I answered truthfully. "Yes. My son, Jackson Williams. He had access to my accounts, without my knowledge or consent, and used that access to steal from me." The words felt both terrible and liberating. By naming the crime and the criminal, I reclaimed my power. The bank immediately froze all activity on my compromised accounts and initiated a formal fraud investigation. Mary had prepared me for the fact that recovery of the funds might be challenging and incomplete, but this formal report was a necessary step, both for potential restitution and for creating an official record of the abuse. After the call, I sat quietly absorbing the enormity of what I had just done. There was no going back now. I had drawn a line that changed my relationship with my son forever. "You did the right thing," Dolores, Mary assured me. "This is not about punishment. It is about protection and justice." The very next day, my phone began ringing incessantly. Jackson, who had ignored my existence for a month, was suddenly desperate to reach me. I let each call go to voicemail, listening to his messages evolve from irritated to panicked as he realized the consequences of his actions were finally catching up to him. "Mom, call me back immediately. There is some issue with your accounts that needs to be straightened out." "Mom, what the hell? The bank is asking me crazy questions about your money. Call me now." "This is ridiculous. I have been managing your finances for years because you cannot handle them yourself. Call me before you make a huge mistake." Finally, a text message appeared that simply read, "We need to talk. This is serious." I did not respond to any of these communications following Mary's advice to maintain complete silence until all legal protections were in place. On the 10th day after my return home, I was sitting in my living room reading when a car screeched into my driveway. Through the window, I watched Jackson emerge looking harried and angry in his expensive suit. For a moment my heart contracted with the instinctive love of a mother seeing her child after a long absence. Then I remembered his words, "If she dies, she dies." I took a deep breath, activated the recording app on my phone, as Mary had advised, and waited for the knock. It came as a pounding that shook the door frame. "Mom, open up, I know you are in there." With deliberate slowness, I rose from my chair, walked to the door, and opened it, standing face to face with my son for the first time since my near-death experience. Jackson looked momentarily startled, perhaps, by my appearance. The surgery and recovery had taken a visible toll, leaving me thinner and more fragile-looking than before. But his shock quickly morphed into anger. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded, pushing past me into the house. "The bank has frozen all your accounts and is talking about fraud investigations. They are asking about withdrawals I made for your benefit." "For my benefit," I repeated calmly, closing the door. "Like the $12,000 you took in July, or the regular transfers from my pension deposits." He paced my living room like a caged animal. "I have been managing your money because you are not capable of it. Everything I did was to protect your assets. By stealing them, I asked my voice steady, despite my racing heart. By taking my jewelry and family heirlooms while I was fighting for my life in the hospital." This direct accusation stopped him short. "What are you talking about? I just borrowed a few things temporarily." "Jackson," I said quietly, "the hospital called you when I was dying. They told you I might not survive the night. And you said, 'If she dies, she dies.'" The blood drained from his face. "They are lying. I never said that." The charge nurse recorded the call as part of hospital protocol. There were witnesses to what you said, but more importantly, you never came. Not once in 4 weeks did you visit your mother who nearly died. That tells me everything I need to know. His expression shifted calculation, replacing denial. "Mom, you are confused. The medications must be affecting your thinking. I tried to visit, but they said family wasn't allowed due to COVID restrictions." The blatant lie might once have made me doubt myself, might have made me eager to believe the best of my son. But that Dolores was gone. The visitor log shows Amanda came every day. Sophia brought her children on weekends. There were no COVID restrictions, Jackson. You simply did not care if I lived or died, except for how it might affect your access to my money. Seeing his manipulation fail, Jackson switched tactics, his face contorting with rage. "After everything I have done for you, do you have any idea how pathetic your little life is? Managing your pitiful accounts was a waste of my time, but I did it because you would have ended up in some state home otherwise." Each cruel word confirmed that my decision was correct. This man standing before me was not the child I had raised and loved. He was a stranger wearing my son's face. "I want my money back," I said simply. "All $78,000 you took without permission, plus the value of the items you removed from my home." He laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Good luck proving any of that. It will be your word against mine, and who do you think they will believe? A confused old woman on heart medications, or a respected financial professional?" "The bank statements speak for themselves," I replied, "as do the fraud investigators who are already building a case. And this conversation which I am recording. His face went slack with shock. You would not dare go to the authorities. I am your son. A son who left his mother to die alone, I said, my voice finally breaking. A son who stole from me and violated my trust in every possible way. For a moment, I glimpsed fear in his eyes as the reality of his situation began to dawn. He had assumed I would remain the passive, accommodating mother who had always prioritized his needs above my own. He had not anticipated this new Dolores forged in the crucible of betrayal and survival. "This is how you want it?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "You realize I will contest any legal action. I will tell them you are mentally incompetent. I will make sure everyone knows you are just a bitter old woman lashing out at her successful son out of jealousy." "You can try," I acknowledged. "But the medical records, financial documentation, and witness statements tell a different story. One of elder abuse by a son who explicitly stated he did not care if his mother died." As the full implications of his actions, and my response sank in Jackson's arrogance, crumbled, revealing the panicked calculation beneath. He had built his life and career on the assumption that consequences were for other people, that his intelligence and charm would always provide an escape route. Now faced with potential professional ruin and legal jeopardy, he resorted to his last weapon, emotional manipulation. "Mom," he said, his voice suddenly soft, and his eyes filling with calculated tears. "I have been under so much stress. The business is struggling and I have made some bad investments. I was desperate and not thinking clearly. Please, we can work this out as a family. I am still your son. 5 years ago, even 1 year ago, this performance might have swayed me. The desire to believe in my child, to preserve our relationship at any cost, had been the cornerstone of my identity as a mother. But standing in my living room that day, still weak from surgery but stronger in spirit than I had ever been, I finally understood that true love required truth. And the truth was that Jackson had become someone I could not trust or recognize. "Yes, you are biologically my son," I said quietly. "But you are no longer welcome in my home or my life until you make full restitution and demonstrate genuine change. Please leave now, or I will call the police and report you for trespassing." As he stood there stunned by this ultimatum, I added, "I have already changed my will, my power of attorney, and all my legal documents. There is nothing here for you anymore, except the possibility of redemption, and that is entirely your choice." Without another word, Jackson stormed out, slamming the door with such force that the windows rattled. Through my living room curtains, I watched him punch the steering wheel of his luxury car before speeding away. I sank into my chair, shaking with adrenaline and grief, but also experiencing a profound sense of liberation. For the first time in decades, I had chosen my own well-being over the endless accommodation of my son's demands. The road ahead would be challenging, but it was finally my own. The weeks following my confrontation with Jackson were some of the most painful, yet liberating of my life. There is a special grief that comes from losing someone who is still living, from accepting that the person you loved exists now only in memory, replaced by someone unrecognizable. I allowed myself to feel this grief fully, to cry for the little boy who had once been the center of my world, and for the mother who had loved him unconditionally. But grief, unlike the regret that often accompanies it, can be a cleansing force when acknowledged and embraced. Each tear created space for new growth, new connections, and a new understanding of myself beyond the role of Jackson's mother. With Mary's assistance, I secured a formal no-contact order after Jackson made several attempts to enter my home while I was at medical appointments. This legal boundary provided not just physical security, but emotional closure, a concrete acknowledgement that our relationship could not continue in its damaged state. Financial recovery proceeded slowly but steadily. The bank's fraud investigation substantiated my claims, resulting in the return of approximately $30,000 of the stolen funds. The remainder would require civil litigation to recover a path I ultimately decided to pursue, not just for the money, but for the principle of accountability. More important than financial restitution was the reconstruction of my life and identity. I joined the senior center 3 blocks from my home, initially just for their Tuesday lunch program, but eventually participating in their book club gentle yoga class and community garden project. There I met Eleanor Mitchell, a retired nurse with a wicked sense of humor, who quickly became a close friend and walking partner. "We have to keep moving, or we will rust," she would declare, appearing at my door each morning at 8 for our neighborhood stroll. Through Eleanor, I connected with a volunteer program at the local elementary school, where I began tutoring struggling readers 2 afternoons a week. The children's unfiltered enthusiasm and the meaningful work of helping them discover the joy of reading brought a purpose to my days that had been missing since retirement. Mrs. Williams. "I read a whole chapter by myself last night," announced 7-year-old Zach during one session, his face glowing with pride. The simple victory reminded me why I had become a teacher in the first place, reigniting my passion for education in a new context. 4 months after my surgery, I received an unexpected letter with a New York postmark. My hands trembled as I recognized Jackson's handwriting on the envelope. For days I left it unopened on my kitchen counter, unsure whether reading it would strengthen my recovery or undermine it. Finally, during one of our regular meetings, I asked Mary for her counsel. "You do not have to open it," she reminded me. "The no-contact order remains in effect, and you owe him nothing, not even your attention." "I know," I replied, "but I need to decide based on what is healthy for me, not just what he deserves." In the end, I chose to read the letter with Eleanor present for support. Jackson's words filled 3 pages with a mixture of qualified apologies and continued justifications. He acknowledged the regrettable things he had said during my medical emergency, but attributed them to work stress and miscommunication. He expressed willingness to move forward if I would drop the legal proceedings, and suggested that families should forgive each other. What struck me most was not what the letter said, but what it omitted: any genuine recognition of the pain he had caused, any commitment to make meaningful amends, or any evidence of true self-reflection. It was in essence not an apology, but a negotiation strategy. My response was brief and clear. I am open to reconciliation based on actions, not words. Full financial restitution, professional counseling, and demonstrated change over time are my non-negotiable conditions. I will always love the son I raised, but I can no longer allow destructive behavior in my life. I never received a direct reply to this letter, though the civil case was unexpectedly simplified when Jackson agreed to a settlement, acknowledging the debt and establishing a payment plan. Whether this represented the beginning of accountability or merely a pragmatic legal decision remained to be seen. With my financial situation stabilizing through the combination of recovered funds, careful budgeting, and reduced expenses, I fulfilled a lifelong dream that summer by taking a guided tour to the Grand Canyon. Standing at the rim of that vast ancient chasm, I felt a perspective shift that no counseling session or self-help book had provided. "We are so small," I murmured to Eleanor, who had accompanied me on the trip, "and yet each of us matters intensely in our own way." Like individual drops in a mighty river, she agreed, squeezing my hand. Separate, but part of something greater. That image of the river stayed with me, informing my understanding of the journey I had traveled. The pain of Jackson's betrayal had been like a boulder dropped into my life stream, initially creating turbulence that threatened to overwhelm me. But water by nature finds new paths. It does not stop flowing because of obstacles. It simply reshapes its course. 6 months after my confrontation with Jackson, I received a surprising phone call from a woman who introduced herself as Megan Jackson's wife of 2 years, a marriage I had known nothing about. "He does not know I am calling," she said hesitantly. "But I have a 3-year-old son from my first marriage who keeps asking about his grandparents. When I found out about you, I thought, well, children deserve to know their family." That call led to a clandestine meeting at a park halfway between our homes, where I met my step-grandson, a bright-eyed boy named Liam, who shared my love of feeding ducks and making up stories. Megan, a thoughtful woman with a quiet strength, explained that she was increasingly concerned about Jackson's behavior and financial decisions. "He is not the man I thought I married," she confided, as we watched Liam on the playground. "Finding out what happened with you made me question everything." While I was careful not to insert myself into their marriage, I provided Megan with resources about financial abuse and encouraged her to establish her own financial security. Our meetings continued monthly, always without Jackson's knowledge, building a tentative bridge to a future where perhaps some form of family connection might be salvaged, even if not with my son directly. This unexpected connection reinforced the most profound lesson of my journey, that love takes many forms, not all of them bound by blood. True family consists of those who treat us with respect, honesty, and care, regardless of genetic ties. The community I had built around me in the aftermath of betrayal, the Eleanor, Amanda, Sophia, Mary, and the many others who had entered my life during this challenging chapter, demonstrated daily what healthy relationships should be. As my strength returned and my new life took shape, I began sharing my story with other seniors through a support group at the community center. Many had experienced similar exploitation by family members, but remained trapped in silence by shame or fear. I thought I was the only one confessed Harold, an 82-year-old widower whose grandson had drained his retirement accounts. I was too embarrassed to tell anyone. By breaking this silence, by naming the painful reality of elder exploitation, even when perpetrated by those closest to us, we began to reclaim not just our financial security, but our dignity. Each shared story diminished isolation and built collective resilience. Now, nearly 18 months after that fateful morning, when my heart quite literally broke, I can say with certainty that healing is possible even from the deepest betrayals. The mother who would have sacrificed everything for her son, including her self-respect, no longer exists. In her place stands a woman who understands that true love, whether for others or oneself, requires boundaries, respect, and reciprocity. Jackson and I have had limited contact always through attorneys or in structured settings. Whether we will ever rebuild a relationship remains uncertain, but what is clear is that any future connection must be based on truth rather than illusion, on mutual respect rather than exploitation. The most valuable lesson I have learned through this journey is that it is never too late to rewrite your story. At 68, I discovered capabilities I never knew I possessed, built friendships deeper than any I had experienced before, and found a voice that had been silent for too long. If you are facing betrayal by someone you love or struggling to set boundaries with family, please know that choosing yourself is not selfish. It is an act of courage and ultimately of love. a recognition that healthy relationships require truth, respect, and reciprocity. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family obligation and self-preservation? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that they are not alone in their struggle. Thank you for walking this path with me today. Remember, the most important relationship you will ever have is the one with yourself, so make it a relationship built on honor, compassion, and unwavering respect.